Hello, I'm Rebecca. In today's video I'm going to show you how I made a bustle pad that I can wear under my favorite 1895 skirt, which actually is a mock-up. I bought Virgil's Scotty hip and bustle pad on Etsy. I included a link in the description. Although my printer didn't print all marks on the pattern, it was really easy to assemble. I marked the edges that needed to be cut off. After taping the pattern pieces, I decided I didn't want that much seam allowance, so I cut it off. I tend to use narrow seam allowances. I folded the pattern to make sure it was symmetrical. I cut the darts on the folded pattern. My printer didn't print the marking for the grain line, I had to add it by hand. In fact, I made two patterns. I pinned the darts on one of them to get a rough idea of what the bustle pad would look like. Of course, paper behaves differently from fabric, but I could at least say that the middle dart needed to go a bit higher. I had some beige cotton that I thought could do. After drawing the pattern around the folded fabric, I cut it with a seam allowance much narrower than that included in the pattern. I lengthened the dart legs and I pushed pins through the dart points. I clipped the legs in the seam allowance. Clipping first would have been much practical, but you learn by doing. Then I turned the two layers over and connected the clips with the points where the pins came through. I decided to make quilting easier by drawing guiding lines. To do that, I cut along the marked lines on the pattern one by one, and I drew around the edges but only on one of the fabric pieces. I stitched along these lines with a basting stitch so that they were visible from the right side as well. I sewed the darts and pressed them. I stitched along the seam line right sides together. I clipped the seam allowance, turned the bustle right side out. After pressing it flat, I top stitched along the edge. I entirely hand stitched the whole piece. You, however, can use a sewing machine. I turned the bustle inside out again and trimmed the seam allowance. I only trimmed it after and not before top stitching to avoid stretching of the fabric. I put the bustle on my dress form to check the shape, quite different from the paper mock-up. I happened to have some wool. Wool is a fabulous material, it's a shame it isn't put to use as much as it deserves. It is easy to separate wool into layers as thick as you want. I tore off a strip to start stuffing the channels in my bustle. You should never cut wool but tear it so that the fibers remain uneven and tangle easily, which helps keep your stuffing in one piece. Believe me, wool is a superior material. I stuffed and stitched the channels one by one, adding a new strip of wool when necessary. I wasn't exactly sure what was necessary, so I hoped for the best. And, well, yes, at quite an advanced stage of quilting, I realized I had cut a hole in the first channel when trimming the seam allowance. A tiny one it was, still I couldn't make myself show it on YouTube, so I started it all over again. This time, however, I decided to make the 2 darts on each side of the middle one longer and position them at a different angle to improve the shape of the bustle. I also made the base of the darts about 2 mm wider. This time I trimmed the seam allowances of the darts, otherwise I did everything in exactly the same manner as before, except that I forgot to add seam allowance to the waistline, which turned out to be a lucky accident. I stitched happily for 2 days. Then I removed the guiding basting thread. Next, I stuffed the main body of the bustle. I built the shape by keeping adding little pieces to wool until I got the desired thickness. The fibers got tangled after I gave them a little bit of tapping. I tore away the surplus. I wrestled the stuffing into the bustle. I added some more wool in the middle. I didn't make a footage of it, but I kept pinning the bustle on myself and putting my skirt over it to check the shape as I was stuffing. To keep the 2 fabric layers and the stuffing in place, I stitched through the whole bustle. I stitched little crosses. This was really difficult. Also, I wasn't using the proper needle. I made my 11 sharps my all-purpose needles because I got used to them so much that I cannot handle any other needles anymore. I didn't place these stitches where the pattern indicated because I noticed that you can seriously deform the bustle by applying them. I, however, wanted to use them to my advantage, so I pressed the bustle at certain points with a finger to see how it affects the shape, and only when I was satisfied did I stitch. The Scotty Bustle pad was a ventilated design, so I should have used grommets, however I didn't have any, and as I am super sensitive to cold, I didn't want any heat to escape. I usually wear 3 skirts, 2 jumpers and 3 pairs of socks. I sleep in socks under feathered away, even in hot summer. I stitched a cotton tape on the waistline, since unfortunately I only had a rather thick tape and had to sew through 4 layers. I couldn't sew in my usual manner, but had to stitch from both sides. When I was ready, I was a bit disappointed that the bustle didn't have the bum-hugging shape I had hoped for. Stuffing and quilting changed the shape. Still, I love it. When you're hand sewing, you stitch all your feelings, thoughts, aspirations into your project. In a strange way, it becomes a product of your mind as much as it is that of your hands. Before you see me wear the bustle, please note that I am going to wear it without a corset, and my main aim at this point isn't a historically accurate shape, but a nice roundish one. If you like this video, please give it a thumb up. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon for notifications.